Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Nuove Sediment, and today we are going to talk and taste differences and similarities between Bordeaux and Super Tuscan wines. I do think of Tuscany as premium, fine wine producing region, but it was not always this way. I am always stunned by the fact that in 1961, when my hero, when it comes to the written word about wine, Hugh Johnson released the World Atlas of Wine, Italy did not even have a chapter of its own. Instead, it was squeezed into a section of Southern and Eastern Europe and Mediterranean, and there were more pages dedicated to Germany than to Italy. I say this not to throw shade at anyone, but to highlight where Italian wine industry stood at the time. But since then, it's been all uphill. Nowadays, we cannot imagine a serious world wine atlas without Italy having a solid chapter of its own. Back in 1961, the same atlas had 72 pages dedicated to France, so it made sense for Italians to look for inspiration there. That's how the story of Barolo boys began, and it is also where the story of Super Tuscans started really. Well, we often talk about the birth of Super Tuscans as a rebellion against the fact that Chianti Classico couldn't be made from 100% Sangiovese. The truth is that majority of us define Super Tuscans by the presence of international grape varieties. Most often, those are the ones widely used in Bordeaux, like Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot, though Syrah is also frequently present. And even though some of the most iconic names associated with the Super Tuscan movement, I call it movement because it is not clearly defined term, are growing their grapes in places like Montalcino or Chianti Classico, most of us now associate Super Tuscans with the coastal area of Tuscany, that of Maremma and Bolgheri. And it makes sense in that way, because Sangiovese thrives in Montalcino and Chianti Classico. The wines it produces there are a great example, but it struggles in the coastal area where the climate is more shaped by the presence of the sea. Furthermore, it was Sassicaia that recognized the similarities between the soils of Bordeaux and those of Bolgheri. So yes, the rise of Super Tuscans was indeed a rule-breaking, but with slightly Bordeaux in mind. The breaking of these traditions did not stop with grape varieties and where they are grown, it also challenged how wines were aged. Traditional large botti were often replaced with smaller, usually new oak French barrels or barriques. And all of these decisions helped to create globally admired style and labels that are now beloved by wine lovers all over the world. I hope that after this introduction, it now makes more sense why I decided to contrast these two styles against each other. I say styles, but I am fully aware that one is a large winemaking region and the other is simply an associated term with no clear definition. Still, when we say these names, a certain wine style pops into our minds. So today I have decided to taste two Super Tuscan wines alongside two Bordeaux wines. Now, I did not go for absolute top Bordeaux or top Super Tuscans because, well, money. But I did choose solid names that represent both the style and the region really well. And just for fun, I have also included the second wines from famous Super Tuscan house and a famous Bordeaux house to see how they stand next to each other. I want to explore both the differences and the similarities in their styles translated from the terroir. And of course, look for their quality and overall value. Coming back to what I said in the beginning, I have always thought of Super Tuscans being this really expensive wine category. But in preparing for this video, I realized something. With few exceptions, the top Super Tuscans are actually more affordable than the top labels from Bordeaux. And even more importantly, their second and third wines are still within the reach for most of us, which we cannot really say about Bordeaux. But enough talking, let's start tasting. As always, these wines were poured by my cameraman, so I don't know which one is which. Let's start, as always, with wine number 1. The nose here seems very familiar. And I want to say it's Cabernet Sauvignon, or at least there is some Cabernet Sauvignon. There is some Bordeaux identity to it. And we do have that really deep garnet color. So you have these black fruits, blueberries, blackberries, blackcurrant. But there's a lot of spiciness as well. But spiciness not in a way that it overpowers the fruit, but it is just kind of sprinkled here and there all over the fruit and just adds kind of extra layer or extra depth or kind of complexity. You do have like nutmeg and clove and slightly something toasted, you know, like that maybe toasted almonds, but almonds with skin. You even kind of feel a slight hint of cumin. Is that a thing? I haven't thought about it. No, not the cumin, the caraway. Cumin is an Indian spice, but caraway is something that is very, very typical here in my cuisine. It helps to preserve all kinds of fermented dishes. Yes, there is this spiciness from a caraway. It's really unique. And the fruit does not stand alone, you know, kind of distance from the spicy character. It is all really well mixed together on the nose. Okay, I've been talking a lot about this wine. Let's taste it. Okay, so this wine gives you a lot of intensity. There's amazing concentration on the palate. You feel all of these fruit and the spiciness that I mentioned on the nose. It is really sitting in the background. You feel it slightly. It's like a shadow, but it is all fruit that you feel on the palate. There's absolutely beautiful acidity. It is really fresh and kind of zesty and filled with a lot of juices. It is at the same time crunchy and acidity driven and shaped, but at the same time, it also shows these really beautiful ripe fruit flavors. Tannins are masterfully balanced. They are grippy slightly, but they're not overpowering. They're not taking over the fruit. I will give this wine 94 points. I think it is really beautiful, juicy, zesty, beautifully concentrated. Let's move to wine number two. Okay, so this wine seems more calmed down. Wine number one was really bursting with energy, bursting with fruit. On the nose, it somehow seems to have seen more sun. It seems more ripe, more sunshine driven. But again, we do feel these really black fruit, blue fruit flavors. They're much riper. They're not as crunchy as we felt them in the wine number one. And you also do feel that spiciness, that toastiness, maybe not as intense as it was in wine number one, and slightly more integrated or bathed within the wine, and more toasty, more sweet, vanilla-like. I don't know why, but it tells me it's going to be a bit bigger. It's not necessarily the case, you know, when you actually taste the wine, but on the nose, it seems more powerful. Let's taste it. This wine actually is a bit riper on the palate as well. So we feel maybe slightly more tannin, but it is riper on the palate. We do feel more opulent, more riper, not as crunchy fruit on the palate as well. The aftertaste is really long and you do feel that ripeness, that blueberry, that blackberry, but maybe slightly crushed character. What I also feel here, something that I didn't feel in wine number one, there's this warmth of alcohol. It is not always a bad thing if it is really well integrated. And sometimes I do not pay attention to it if it is the first wine I'm tasting because, you know, your taste buds are really sensitive at the moment, but it is the second wine. And coming after wine number one, which I am sure is around 14% of alcohol, and here I do not think it is 15, so it's not really that much higher, but feeling that alcohol present on the palate, it maybe slightly threw it off balance. It is not bad wine in any way. It was just You just felt it. It did not disturb me, but in wine number 1, I didn't feel it at all. So for wine number 2, I will give points 92. Let's move to wine number 3. Okay, so wine number 3 is a teaser. Wine number 3, you kind of feel some fruit and then it hides. And then you feel something spicy, you know, maybe nutmeg or clove, but then it hides away again. And interestingly, I do feel something red here as well, like some red fruits and like really ripe red cherries or red plums. So you do have these really ripe blackberries, but you also have something red, something cooler maybe. But that signature spiciness, that, you know, herbal hint, we also have it here. Chateau. Let's taste it. Wow. It is really interesting about wine number 3. Let's talk about it more. In no way I can describe this wine as a perfect wine, but I think it was just, on the palate, it was just so interesting and it offered so kind of many dimensions and layers, and maybe there was some imperfection here and there, maybe slightly grippier tannin, stickier, you know, on the gums and the teeth. You do also feel that ripeness of the fruit, and here and there you also have those mixed red cherries, red plums I mentioned on the nose, some of that toastiness, some of that vanilla, some of those nuts. So it's not like wine number 1 really left that really perfect kind of polished elegance, and wine number 3 felt slightly rustic in a way, but there was some kind of charm. This is why I wanted to talk about this more, because even though while you're tasting it, oh, it's opening up as well on the nose. So even though while I taste this wine, I might find places to critique it, somehow altogether on the palate and on the nose, it just makes sense. You know, I sometimes talk about people, the way some of the imperfections just makes a lot of sense and makes these people even more beautiful. And it seemed this way about the wine. I don't know what it is. It is just, I tasted it. It just made sense. Everything fell into right places. So I will give this wine 93.5 because I like to give 0.5 points now. Let's move to wine number 4. Okay. So this again, no. All right, so at first it seemed kind of sunnier, but then it toned back a little bit. And this is really dark color. I mean, with all the wines, we are in the Bordeaux blend category, but this seemed the most colored in the glass. And again, this wine represents more of that black and blue fruit-driven flavors. Not as crunchy, more crushed and ripened style. Fruit that has been gathered and left in the on the table for a while in the sun. Warm fruit, slightly oxidized maybe. And again, as with every single wine in this tasting, we do feel some of that spiciness, but here the spiciness is more sweeter. It is more like a toasty character to the wine, not as spicy, not as peppery as maybe I felt it in wine number 1. Let's taste the wine. Okay, so this is really big and powerful and structured wine. It screams muscle. And you feel those really ripe black and blue berries all over on the palate. But you also have that really intense structure from the tannin, that backbone. It is just kind of shaping the wine in this perfect you know, square, and all the fruit is neatly packed within that square, and not a drop of fruit juice or berry gets out of it. It is just created that way. I do think it is beautiful wine. Yes, I mean, I am smelling this wine and there's so much structure, so much power. It is just so intense, in your face. And despite the fact that it might not be the wine that I would choose for my own enjoyment this specific evening, I would choose maybe different wines. I do think it is of premium, beautiful, high quality. The concentration is there, aftertaste is there. So I will give this wine 93 points. Shall we reveal the wines? I will start with the least scored wine, which is 92. It sounds funny because 92 is a really good score. So it is actually a top wine. It's just in today's selection, it was maybe, you know, not the favorite one, but it is still a beautiful, beautiful wine. So let's see what's hiding here. Okay, so it is 2020 Grattamacco Bolgheri Superiore. So this is the first label of Grattamacco. So this is the top Super Tuscan. It is actually in Bolgheri based. And if I'm not mistaken, they're actually having vineyards relatively high above the sea level, which is not that typical in the area. I think it is between 100 and maybe 200 meters above sea level. And their vineyards are located amongst forests. So they really do enjoy that cool influence, slightly cooler influence than maybe rest of the Bolgheri. Beautiful wine. I think it is the first time I have tasted it, or maybe the second. Yeah, it may be the second time. So it was interesting to come back to it. So the next wine I scored 93 points, and it was wine number 4. That was the wine of power and structure. It is so interesting. I knew when I was saying this. Okay, you know, it is just, you cannot talk like this with wines when you do blind tasting, because I remember I said it that it was not my style that I would prefer for this evening. Maybe I would have preferred it for another evening. It's so funny because I love Pichon. Pichon is a wine that I do enjoy. I am not always greatest fan of all Bordeaux wines, but the style that Pichon makes is usually something that I do enjoy a lot. So it is kind of, I was shooting myself in the feet saying this. Next time I will be much more careful. But with all honesty, 2021 vintage was very, very difficult and challenging for all the winemakers in Bordeaux. And so kudos for them to make this kind of wine, to make that beautiful structure, to make it feel so ripe and full and rich and concentrated. I am sure there must have been a lot of grape selection there. Yes. Okay, you know what this means? The highest scored wines are the second labels, because I have the first wine, Grattamacco, and I have Grand Vin from Bordeaux. So we have 2 second labels, and that is interesting. Let's move to the next wine, which was 93.5. Wine number 3. It was wine that I told you was maybe imperfect, but because of that, it felt really charming and beautiful to me. And it is Serre Nuove dell'Ornellaia 2022 vintage, and it is actually mostly based on Merlot. So up until now, this was Cabernet Sauvignon based, and this is, I think, more than 60%. Here we have Merlot. And I really did enjoy it. I thought it was beautiful and lively and juicy. Okay, good. I think I know the highest scored wine now. Let's reveal it. Wine number 1. I gave this wine 94 points. It was the very first wine I tasted. I liked it a lot. And it is 2019 Alter Ego by Palmer from Margaux. I failed to mention that Pichon Baron is from Pauillac, so actually it is usually associated with this power and structure, and Margaux is usually associated with lightness and elegance. And I do think that this wine represented its appellation, where it's coming from, so beautifully. I did not want to say it out loud, but for me, when I smelled it the very first time, I thought, this is definitely Bordeaux. Like, it cannot be from Tuscany. It did not have the sunshine. However, at the same time, it had that elegance and that intensity and concentration. It was really beautiful. And I think amongst professionals, Palmer has always been really loved and respected wine producer that has not really kind of skyrocketed their prices like crazy. And to be honest, their neighbor is Chateau Margaux. So it's really important where you are located. One thing, you have to have great terroir, but also what are your neighbors? Because they sometimes help you, you know, to raise the bar and show what is really possible and what's happening in the area and what you can do. And this is second wine. Beautiful, beautiful label. Thank you very much for watching. I think this was really interesting tasting. I do feel that maybe the acidity was shining more in the Bordeaux, and I do feel the tannin was more structured and more prominent in the Bordeaux examples than it was in the Tuscany. I mean, Tuscany, we spoke about it. It is located next to the sea, but it is Mediterranean climate. It is not oceanic climate as it is in case with Bordeaux. So in a ways, it is more sunshine. You kind of, the fruit just gets riper and summers are drier. There's no doubt that all of these wines can age for another 10, 20 years easily. No problem. It is really a question of the style, which character, what kind of fruit ripeness, what kind of acidity, body, and tannin profile you enjoy the most. Let me know in the comment section below which are your favorite Super Tuscan wines, which are your favorite Bordeaux wines. Do you also sometimes prefer second or third wines better, as I did in this tasting? And if you do enjoy Super Tuscan wines, make sure to watch my other video where I tasted side by side 2 brands of Super Tuscans, Ornellaia and Sassicaia.